we have entered now an era in which all aspects of our lives, we depend on these digital platforms and services, not only for our personal lives and how we conduct our business or education, but also our politics. And if the way in which these networks are structured, the way in which they're managed, the way in which they're governed in terms of their private terms of service and so on, is not compatible with the kind of values that we want our society to have, the kind of freedoms that we expect, the kinds of freedoms and rights and ability to hold government accountable that people are risking their lives for around the world every day. If these platforms and services are not contributing in a sustainable manner to the kind of world we want to have, that's not acceptable. We're facing a common problem with internet-related legislation, not only in the United States, but I think around the democratic world, where legislators are faced with a problem. Okay, we have attacks on our network, or we have theft of intellectual property, or we have child porn, or we have cyberbullying, and constituencies are screaming, do something, you know. And so they want to do something to resolve that particular problem, whatever basket that problem happens to be in. And so they go for a solution, and without really thinking about how that solution is going to affect these other areas. What was good about what we saw with the Stop Online Piracy Act and the debate about this particular legislation, which was trying to solve a problem, and it was like in response to one constituency that was screaming about the problem without consulting with everybody else who was going to be affected, to see what are the other ways of solving the problem that might not be quite so damaging for free expression, and put technical mechanisms that look like the Chinese firewall and legal mechanisms that you know, impose kind of unacceptable burdens on internet companies to police their users.
And when it comes to filtering or blocking of websites, I actually don't believe that it's ever the solution. I think that if we look at the way the U.S. deals with child pornography, which is, you know, matching photos in a database and taking down the websites, going after the hosting, that I feel like that's a much better solution to what other governments do, which is, again, just blocking them and forcing the problem underground.
There are a few more controls in terms of what the U.S. government accesses under what circumstances. All those controls are excessively loose and excessively unaccountable and not sufficiently subject to constraint. That said, though, you know, in China, you can post a tweet and have somebody, a policeman, show up at your doorstep and take you into detention. And to my knowledge, that has not happened in this country. We are definitely entering into, I think, a recognition that if you really want to be untraceable, if you really want to be completely sort of not monitored, or you want to be ironclad sure that you're not monitored, don't conduct your conversation electronically. You know, the U.S. Postal Service is certainly the most secure way to communicate with people. That's absolutely true. You know, handwritten letters. You know, you need a warrant. The government needs a warrant to read your mail. It's really clear that the protections are very clear-cut. And to read your email, they are not clear-cut at all. And there are all kinds of gaps and loopholes. You know, if you're using Gmail or Hotmail or Yahoo Mail or whatever, and your email's over 180 days old, it's just totally fair game.
We still do see companies, examples of companies handing over information to foreign governments without much consideration of what that you know, sort of legal process is. And then I would say even more commonly, we see companies taking down content at the request of foreign governments without really any consideration at all. And so I do think that, you know, a lot of these companies are not, you know, not only is their terms of service not really compliant with free speech principles, but then, you know, they're also just kind of taking down content at the request of anybody.
Skype, in order to market its software in China, went into a joint venture arrangement with a Chinese company called Tom. And it turned out that that version of Skype was logging everybody's text messages on Skype and sending them to a Public Security Bureau computer in China. And this is why I think it's really globally in the interest of industry everywhere to kind of set up a set of mechanisms to prove, look, we are really, we have a global standard on how we're protecting user information, and we're allowing ourselves to be kind of audited that we're actually adhering to these standards. And there'd be a lot more trust, I think, in our networks if that would happen. And I think commerce would benefit. We need to demand transparency and accountability, and we need to be aware. And I think, though, that we've gotten to the point where, yes, a lot of information is collected about us. We need to require that companies obtain more permission before they collect information, that they're more clear about how it's being used and sold, and that there be more regulation about things being resold and so on, and that there be more reporting on it, so that at least if something's being abused against us, we understand who to hold responsible for it. And this is, I think, a lot of the problem is, how do you constrain the abuse of this? Because sometimes we consent to the collection of our information because it's convenient for us. And so, okay, maybe we want to do that. But we also want to make sure that it's not abused for purposes that we did not consent to. And right now, we just don't have the mechanisms to prevent that abuse.